Welcome to the DNA Talks podcast, where we take on the mission of unlocking the code of your genetics. This season is all about you, upgrading your health, not just on the surface, but down to the root cause. Join us as your clinicians of the DNA Company investigate your DNA and beyond. The intention of this podcast is to enhance your lifestyle by changing what is within your control. This does not substitute the medical advice given by your personal doctor, therapist, or other healthcare professionals.
Bonjour, mes amis, and welcome to this DNA Talks podcast. Today, we're going to be diving into conversation with Ashley Koff, and we're going to be exploring some of her career, her approach to personalized medicine, and we'll definitely be tail spinning into ideas of metabolic health. So, for those that are gearing up to the new year, and unfortunately, what is always a time where we decide we're going to lose those few extra pounds for good or bad, this might be an episode that you want to tune into, because it will be one that is very informed by science, but also very informed by compassion, because very rarely is it a choice that a person is carrying extra weight. And so we want to support people in how they can navigate better health within their body. So Ashley is a registered dietitian and the founder of the Better Nutrition Program, a nutrition course director for UC Irvine Susan Samuel's Integrative Health Institute Integrative and Functional Medicine Fellowship. She's also a faculty member at the Integrative and Functional Nutrition Academy, where she teaches an integrative and functional nutrition approach to obesity and weight management. She is also the author of an upcoming book called Your Best Shot, which is available January 6, 2026. A practitioner for more than 25 years, Ashley is leading a transformation movement in personalized nutrition, turning better, not perfect, choices into practical, sustainable strategies that deliver real health outcomes. Through patient stories and personal experience, she shows that optimal health is not just possible, it's essential to living your fullest life. Ashley has been recognized as one of CNN's top 100 health makers, featured in InStyle as Hollywood's leading dietitian, and selected as Weston's Global Nutrition Ambassador. Ashley, bonjour and welcome. How are you?
Thank you. I'm so good. It's been a bit since I've heard the French happening, and I love it. I lived in France a couple of times in my life, and I was just like, oh, this is so wonderful. Yes.
Oh, vous parlez français?
I do, but we're going to pause it right there because I also learned Spanish, and I got into this world of where I just confuse the two in my head, so much. But I more than anything love to listen to it and love to hear people speaking French. So yeah.
Oh,
yes.
wonderful.
Yeah.
It's always wonderful to find another soul in the world that speaks it. Yeah.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
For this reason and so many more, I'm grateful that our paths have crossed, because you have such I think just even in the first discussions with you in regards to your approach to health and in regards to your approach to care of people, there's a lot of synergy. There's a lot of personalization. Can you, for the audience who maybe has not met you before, can you give us a little bit of your story? How have you gotten to this point where we're having a conversation today?
Yeah, thank you. I know a lot of times people make the assumption that as somebody who's practiced helping people with their weight health for 25 years, that it's just like this thing that I know how to do. And it isn't. It is self-learned, and it is always, it's an ongoing practice. But my life was really bifurcated growing up. I like to say I was sort of a cross between Spanky from the Little Rascals and Shirley Temple, like in appearance. I had this curly hair and I had this big, bold personality, and I was funny and fun, but I had a belly, and it was never really, probably until about 10 or 11, it wasn't perceived as an issue. It was, you're cute, it's fun. And I was definitely the one in my family and just around that was never had any health issues. And then about 12, 13, suddenly society starts to see you as a fat kid, and I started getting teased, and I think that expanded my belly and kind of broke me down inside, because I started down this path of trying to figure out how to get rid of my belly, and it led to just increasing amounts of failures. There might be times where I was successful in short spurts, but it was sort of long-term failure. And so here I was, this really successful individual in school and sports and friends and stuff, but I had this, this failure on my physical side, and I was still not deemed unhealthy. the interesting thing was I had ear infections and throat infections from birth, and I was on so many antibiotics for addressing those, even sometimes preventatively given antibiotics. We didn't know what we know about them today. And so it really didn't occur to anyone until my, till university, where at that point they said, we need to take your tonsils out. So the answer was like, oh, there's just a problem in you. Let's get rid of that. And I still was acute. I would gain weight. But when my tonsils came out, I actually got an infection and I couldn't eat. And it was the first time in my life I got really skinny, like really thin. And that lasted for like maybe 3 months. And so it was just this, I like seeing myself as like a totally different person in that time period. And also seeing how society treated me was very interesting. And I would go on to continue to try to diet because, of course, the weight came back, and basically hit a rock bottom in my early 20s. And through that experience, was introduced to a gastroenterologist who was a different kind of doctor. That doctor asked me questions got real curious about my childhood, got curious about how my body was running, and said to me the life-changing statement, which is, your body it's not what you're eating or not eating, because I was doing a lot of not eating. He's like, but your body does not have what it needs to run better. And specifically, your digestive system doesn't have what it needs. And we went about, I set about a course with him and then later with other practitioners doing that repair work for my digestive system. So that's the lens through which I learned about personalization. I am the daughter of and a family member to a lot of allopathic physicians. And in the allopathic and the traditional physician space, I didn't have a disease or something that could be diagnosed, but the treatments for other things were actually creating a weight health issue for me. Now, underlying all of that, and we're fast forwarding a good 15, 17 years, when I ultimately had my genetics, when I was ultimately able to look at nutrigenomics and see, I was like, oh, at first I had that, oh gosh, I was designed to be obese, and I was designed to be like, and I would see like leptin resistance, and here's this. And then I had this wonderful reframing. I had this great conversation with a genomics practitioner who said, I want to show you how your body is actually designed. And this is just before I turned 50, and said that by design, you are a survivor. Like your body will, like it hangs on to things, but when we look at how your body, she's like, I haven't seen this in most pro athletes. She's like, you are an endurance pro athlete, like inside of a being. And so I started climbing mountains. I mean, it was that transformative for me. I was like, wow, like I'd always been interested in sports, and I enjoyed, pushing my body, but getting permission to see my body in a different way and not see it as the victim of being destined to be fat was so helpful. And what I went on to do with patients was to add that as a tool, so we can talk about that. But I think my early understanding, my own experience took me from a society that looked at weight in one area and health in another and kind of never brought the two together, made me this perfect person to be a practitioner that helped people reclaim their weight health by really diving in and understanding your unique design, and then saying, where is your weight health? If your body's an ecosystem, where is weight health being challenged? And how can we use what we know about you as an individual to optimize it? And that led me to writing a book on that, because we are in the GLP-1 era where people are for right and wrong saying that there is a shot that can do all of this. And that is absolutely false. But the shot can be depending on which version of the medications, I have to be careful. But the ones that are biosimilar to our own hormones can be a tool to leverage to help people optimize their weight health as part of a personalized system. So that's what got us here to each other today. Yes. Yeah. Twists and turns. That's right.
Here we go.
Yep. There we go. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I wonder perhaps, why don't we, for the balance of our conversation, almost start with GLP-1s and then work back?
Okay.
Because let's explore GLP-1s, because I think that's this thing that has taken the market and people's imaginations and hopes by storm.
Sure.
And I can appreciate if you're in a space where you're really trying to lose weight and you've tried quite literally, or at least you feel like you've tried everything. This sounds like that promised land.
Yeah.
So with awareness, for some people it may not be appropriate. Can you talk to me about GLP-1s and this nuance? Because I think you and I would both agree for some people they're very appropriate, and then other people maybe not so much.
Sure. So there was a first generation of, and these first and second generation medications have been around, and we understand how they work because they're biosimilar to our own body's hormones. So our body makes, so probably the first place to start is that GLP-1 is not a medication. It is a hormone in your body. GIP is a hormone in your body, PYY, CCK. And I call these your weight health hormones or your switch because they go on for about 2 to 5 minutes and then they're broken down, and especially GLP-1 and GIP. So what happened was scientists were able to figure out how to extend them for about 24 hours, where they're operational for 24 hours. And then they found out how to extend those from 24 hours to 24 times 7. So where they stayed on for, about 7 days. And that is what liraglutide, semaglutide, and tirzepatide are. And they are biosimilar in that they go in and your body's receptor sites, all throughout the body, we have these receptor sites for GLP-1 and GIP, which we've learned thanks to the invention of these medications, that we have these receptor sites. And they when you take them as an injection, they go to that they have the medication go right to those receptor sites. So they can circumvent your whole body's weight health process of turning on the hormones and having the hormones get where they need to go, and having them survive, especially if they're only, stay alive for 2 to 5 minutes, but and give and make sure that you get receptor site satisfaction. Why is that important? Because when they go in and they agonist, so the receptor site accepts them, that means now that things like appetite and food noise in the brain get triggered appropriately in the bloodstream and throughout in the pancreas and in the liver. Glucagon and insulin work appropriately, or have the potential to work appropriately. And we see other things happening, as a result of that. But they're primarily invented to be able to do that first for diabetes, and then seeing the weight implications for weight loss there. I want to be very clear. No one should set a goal of weight loss. You should lose fat. You should remove fat from where it's not supposed to be. So fat is not supposed to be deposited into our organs. So let's, if it's inappropriately becoming visceral fat, we want to remove that. Even if you don't have other subcutaneous fat, you can have visceral fat be a problem. And we may want to work on that. And you also may have blood sugar dysregulation and not have any body fat issues. And that can be a factor. You should not be losing muscle as a result of this, because the muscle and bone are also implicated. These hormones help to regulate that. And then also there are people who, based on modern day society and our exposures, appetite and food noise, they may be thinking about food and feeling appetite and overriding it through like a very, intense willpower. I will not eat. I will not do these things. But their brain being focused on this is actually keeping them from being present and fully like in their heart space and interacting, in society in that space. And then there are others that are suppressing their own hormones with things like impaired sleep or drinking alcohol or other medications and treatments. So there's a variety of reasons why a medication that comes in as a hormone replacement therapy could be a tool that we use ongoing, or could be a tool that we use for a period of time to restore optimal function of our own hormones, as we dive into it.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I've heard you say is there's use case for diabetics, and then we kind of found this happy use case within those that are on the larger side of things. And while it will go in and there's a biomimicry, there's a biology that is enacted that suppresses appetite, it may not necessarily get to root cause, which based on the person can be a variety of things, right? From truly there's sleep disruption, from truly it's stress within life, from truly it's never learned how to eat properly. Right. And then I would imagine, and give me your experience in this, for those that, take this, lose weight, but haven't really addressed root cause, the root cause remains. And so there's still something that's digging away at our health and wellness.
Yeah. And I think almost everyone has multifactorial weight health issues. I think that
Mm.
because when we look at just how big we're all impacted by how our family members responded to us or what treatments we've had in our lives or, just different things, right? I love where you're going with that. So, number one, if somebody loses weight and they lose muscle along with fat, then they're less metabolically active. And it's going to be harder to maintain any weight loss in that time period. The body's going to fight against that. If somebody goes on a medication, loses weight, and their body was previously suboptimally nourished, but now is further suboptimally nourished, then the body is not going to have the resources that it needs for things like hair, for muscle, for bone, for even for things like optimal blood sugar, because you might not have the trace minerals that the body needs for insulin to knock on the cell door and have blood sugar be allowed to enter. So we can use a medication. So this medication definitively will exacerbate any underlying dysfunction. And that is pretty much true of any medication. So I also want to acknowledge just the bias. The questions that are posed about this medication usage belies so much of the societal biases that we see around weight and weight health, because we're not asking these questions about statins or proton pump inhibitors, and we should be asking a lot more about them on that part.
Correct.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so many
Yeah.
more questions, right? So I think that if you use the medication in that capacity and you don't, and you can, and things are exacerbated and worsened in the body, then you're going to be in this catch-22 where you may have weight wins, but not health wins, and your weight health system is going to be thrown off. Now, there's another world in which you use the medication and you optimize your weight health and you use it as a tool.
Mm-hmm.
And then the question becomes, can I or should I choose to come off the medication? Or maybe I'm having to come off the medication. Maybe I'm now pregnant, or maybe I have to have a cancer treatment, or financially I can't afford the medication
Mm-hmm.
any longer. And so in that instance, what we have to do is we have to move you along a continuum of, if the medication worked for you, quote unquote worked, if you see weight health wins, you lost fat, visceral fat, subcutaneous, you retained muscle, you protected bone, you optimized blood sugar, you have proved the hypothesis that your weight health hormones were suboptimally functioning before. You needed the medication for them to be optimally functioning. So now we need to go back and say, so did we do enough to correct for them to be optimally functioning that you can fully come off the medication? In most instances, it's a year, maybe even a couple of years, where I'm working with somebody where they're spreading their dose out over a longer period, or maybe they're going down on the dose, or maybe we're adding in some supplements that will activate or optimize, weight health hormones and be able to do that. So I think it's, this is truly, truly a tool in the toolkit of personalized medicine and personalized nutrition. And when it is used impersonally, it is a failure. Like that is, and it's the medication. It's not a failure. It's not the human that's a failure.
Yeah. I think I remember when these agents first came on the scene, or at least were first popularized, the doctor and me got excited because it was one of the first times that I had seen weight loss enter the medical space
Yeah.
in a conversation of, let's figure out how we serve you best and how we find good health. And were those conversations helpful? Like, I don't know if I necessarily agree exclusively with like the pharmacy model of take this pill and then good luck, goodbye, right?
Never.
But it, at least the way you've detailed it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where, hey, maybe we use this agent to support the hormonal side as we explore and do other things. That conversation is so powerful to me. And I like that GLP-1s, used or not used, is bringing weight into the medical office in a way that is not as shameful, and in a way where it's like, well, you just have to eat less and move more. Why are you here?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah.
advice we know through multiple studies, incredible amounts of research, does not work. I would offer it's unkind at this point in time to offer that advice to people.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, if that's the one thing we could break up with, I think that would be, such a societal win.
Yeah.
I think that the amount of judgment around these medications is like so valuable. Like like it's just glaring. And I've said to so many physicians directly, you also are not able to medically manage a patient through optimal use of this medication. You can prescribe it. You can definitely assess some of the pieces. Maybe you have a BIA or a DEXA scale and you're following that, and maybe you're following lab work. But when we're optimizing weight health, we're looking at we're looking at your traumas, we're looking at your mindset, we're looking at how you live your life, we're looking at nutrient optimization, which may mean like when I'm home, I eat this. When I travel, I eat this and take these supplements. When I'm, sick, I do that. Like there's so many
Yeah.
components of this. And,
Yeah.
in bariatrics, we never had, so in weight loss surgery, we never had, at least I wasn't a part of as a dietitian, but somebody having weight loss surgery and it was like, okay, now go. Like it was always like, now at least go to your support groups or meet with the nutritionist, do
Yeah.
this, because the surgeon can only do the operation. Well, I would argue that the physician can only do the prescribing and some of the check-ins.
Mm.
And so this also really looks at our medical system, and now we have this very weird, weird is the word because it's so wrong in so many ways, but like interestingly, is addressing some significant issues. So it's just weird, but definitely problematic that you can go direct to consumer to these online companies. You can buy this medication. They have a physician that you may or may not actually meet with. Maybe you fill out an AI form, or maybe you actually meet with the physician, and somebody sends you the prescription. And you're then like, and maybe they're like, oh, we have to meet with you once a month, like to, hear how you're doing or answer these questions so we can keep prescribing you it. And they're like, they feel ethically okay with this. Like, it's just, to me, it's like,
Yeah.
and yet there's so many other people that because of the way that our system is set up, they actually don't have access. Because I've had people say to me, well, should I try to fail should I just eat a ton of sugar and get a really bad A1C so that I can be diabetic for a moment, so that I can be prescribed, like insurance will pay for, this. So I get it. Like we're in a weird world. What I think is the underpinning of all of this is you and I are not early as practitioners and clinicians in the world of understanding personalization, of understanding our DNA, of understanding our epigenetics, and the whole way, like, and the value of that information.
Yeah.
Society hasn't caught up there. And so what you're seeing is you're in that prescriptive model that you were just saying, and yet we have access to so much personalization. So it seems incongruous to us that it could be in this model, but we just have to keep disrupting to point out that it should be incongruous. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah,
Yeah.
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 No, I hosted a talk, and this was principally to medical doctors, and the conversation was, your toolbox is limited when it comes to weight loss, right? Most of you have learned eat less, move more, and good luck. And even as these other agents come in, it's missing the individualized person before you. And so then I went through genes that can influence, and I looked at genes that influence appetite, and genes that influence metabolism, and then genes that influence food preferences, and then genes that influence the mind, especially trauma, and how certain genes can then be based on that exacerbation, then have us reaching for food for comfort, right? And the fact that we can look into a person and say, hey, if you're struggling with weight, instead of saying, you're just struggling with weight, we can say it's actually more related to your trauma response,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Then we can tailor treatment. So I know genetically, like there's so many different viewpoints that I can look at a person from your personal experience, from your work. What are the viewpoints you find that are really important? So I would imagine nutrition chief amongst them. But when you sit with someone when they're struggling with weight, and let's, for whatever reason, be it choice, finances, access, they're not going to be investigating GLP-1s. How do you approach that? What are you considering? What are you screening for? What do you find important?
Yeah. And I use the analogy of a pizza in my book. So the crust
Right.
is digestion and hydration. So we can't get nutrition to the body where it's needed in the form that the body can use it when digestion, and I include hydration in there as part of the absorption process and the delivery. That can't occur. So that's going to be the foundational piece. And that's going to be foundational, whether GLP-1 shot or not, on that part. So any genetic insights that help me there are really important. Methylation, I think, is just foundational, because we're looking at metabolism, we're looking at cellular function. So I'd start there. Your sauce is your nutrition, and your cheese are your lifestyle choices. Now, interestingly, within the sauce, I look at timing, I look at quantity, quality, nutrient balance. So when we talk about genes, even in that space, with the popularity of intermittent fasting or fasting just in general, and it's so misused, and like there's so many different definitions and all these other things. There are times where genetic insights can show me how somebody might do better with very specific boundaries, and somebody actually, we need to erode some of the boundaries that they've set up and optimize. Similarly with quantity, like I think I was telling you, I'm like, I have genes where I'm like, if I like eat anything, like my body is holding on to it, right? So I need to make sure that I am not over consuming at one time. I use the analogy of your body being like a race car, not a street car. And so if you're filling up at a pit stop, if you put too much gas in the tank or even put extra gas in the car, it's dangerous, it's problematic. So when I look at my genes, I'm like, okay, do not, like, number one, dial in your digestion. And number two, do not overconsume in the moment. And so the person that was hearing like, hey, I need 100 or 150 grams of protein because it's 1 gram per pound of body weight or, something. If they're looking at that, they may not have the information currently to say like, okay, yes, but you also can't exceed 30 grams of protein at a particular pit stop. So you need 5 pit stops of 30 grams, whereas there might be somebody who is a little bit more efficient and maybe like 40 or 50 grams at a time isn't going to be a problem for them. So I think those are some of the nuances that we can really unpack, with the genetic side. I'll say the other thing that genetics have really helped me to do is to help people reframe how they perceive the challenges that they experience with their body. So, personal example, I, had somebody like initially when they looked at my genes, it wasn't the nicest way to receive it, but they were like, oh, if you've struggled with your weight, I see that in your genes. Like you really are set up for like genes that make like keeping your weight optimal, in particular, your fat mass optimal, real challenging. And I think they thought they were doing me a favor. Like, hey, like, I'm sorry, that's hard. It was a totally separate conversation years later when somebody sat down and said, wow, like you have genes that are like, you're like the ultimate survivor. Like you're like out there, your body is designed to like work hard, work intense. It was like, you've got an endurance, like professional athlete in you, right? That totally empowered me to, and they weren't different, it wasn't different genes, in that space. So I think we can use the genetic conversation to help somebody there's always two ways to present a story. And if we present a story of opportunity, probably the best non-weight related example, but ironically, one of the best GLP-1 examples is looking at ApoE. A lot of people, when they see that like a 3, 4, or 4, 4, like it's like, oh, you have the Alzheimer's gene. Like, so you're going to get Alzheimer's. Well, if we really unpack that, we know what we're talking about is much more about vascular, like we can look at inflammation, we can understand what's brain protective, we can understand cardiometabolic function. And so that helps us say like, hey, you know what, your body is really good at this, but it's also not great at this. So how do we lean into choices for you that are going to, support its efficiencies and not exacerbate inefficiencies? And, I think in that one, the reason I bring that into GLP-1 is people have been saying like they're so excited about GLP-1 shots and the information that it is cognitive, may support cognition and be helpful in reduction of Alzheimer's disease. Of course, because when you look at what GLP-1 and GIP do in the body is they regulate insulin and glucagon and they regulate blood sugar. And we know blood sugar and we know vascular function. Those two things are critical for your brain to be nourished and not overwhelmed, et cetera. So, I think that like the gene part of it is like so awesome to just decode for. And maybe somebody who doesn't have maybe somebody, if they are showing up with visceral fat and not subcutaneous fat, but they're really having challenges to optimize their blood sugar. And we have that ApoE 3, 4, 4, 4. Like I might turn around and say, I think you're a great candidate for a low dose of semaglutide or tirzepatide to use as part of us addressing visceral fat and your blood sugar, and that helps us. Unfortunately, that's all out of pocket because that's nothing that is approved for insurance reimbursement right now. But it's one way to think about it. Yeah.
Yeah. But again, like a beautiful nuance of personalized medicine, because in particular, when you're talking about the fat that sits around the organs, so many people fall into that skinny fat category,
Yeah.
right? Where
Yep.
if you were to look at them, if you were to walk into the GP, the family
Hmm.
practitioner office, and they saw you, they're like, yeah, you're a tiny little thing, you're fine. But
Hmm.
if they don't do that further workup, right, that further personalized investigation of the person before you, be that through genes, other lab work, or just simple conversation, that opportunity is missed and that person is excluded based on their weight, interestingly, but not through the paradigm that we would expect it to be.
And I think that we see that, unfortunately, right now so significantly in the epidemic of women who, in sort of 60 plus, who have Alzheimer's, and
Mm,
and there's been a large focus on that as it relates to hormone replacement therapy of our
mm,
sex hormones, right, and understanding
mm,
that piece. And these are women who maybe also, many of them I've seen as patients where they didn't battle their weight, and they were perceived as thin, but if we had gone back, maybe there was this skinny fat there, maybe there was
yeah.
blood sugar dysregulation, and then when their hormones shifted and they went through perimenopause, it was like 5 or 10 pounds that they were unhappy about. And they tried dieting. So they undernourished their brain, they undernourished their body. And it was this like perfect storm, unfortunately, for, what was
Mm,
going on there. When we look at brain, when we look at Alzheimer's and we look at brain support, and we look at glymphatic, like understanding
mm,
detoxification and elimination, in the
yeah.
brain cells, we need an optimally nourished body. And, that's one of the things that it's one of the reasons I'm actually really careful with semaglutide and tirzepatide to make sure that when we use a medication, the goal is not to have you eat less. The goal is to have you learn to eat in a manner that nourishes, that optimally nourishes your body. And if we can't accomplish that solely with food, we will add supplements. So there's a complement there, to be able to do it. But I had somebody recently ask me, what if you're on, my patient is on a semi-glutide and they just can't eat. And so they just can't optimally nourish their body. I'm like,
Mm,
so then that's an inappropriate use of that semi-glutide. It is too high, or tirzepatide, it's too high in a dose, or we need to space some time out so that we can make sure that they get in the nutrients and maybe slow down some of the fat loss. That's
mm,
okay, because we're not in a race here. We're in an optimization, journey, not a sprint. So I think that's so important
yeah.
to bring up. And
Yeah.
I will also come back to, it's where the interdisciplinary component of, as a dietitian, I am a weight health specialist. Like, I'm a nutrition specialist. That is my job on that part. And when we get into the allopathic model of having these medications prescribed by physicians in that space, oftentimes we miss the value of needing a specialist to help somebody personalize this for optimal outcomes.
Yeah. 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 I think at least my hope with medicine is that it becomes much more collaborative,
Yeah.
both between patient and provider, but then also between different providers,
Yeah.
right? Like I
Yeah.
think the beautiful that computer science and the beautiful that science and that modern medicine is offering is that this information overload, and it would be foolish of me to assume I can know it all and not
Right.
rely on someone like yourself, or us not rely on another provider in their specialty,
Or
right?
like, even, and I use the term infobesity. It's interesting you bring up the computer
Yeah.
side. I know your background, but I was
Yeah.
at the Consumer Electronics Show in like about 2011. And as digital health was coming on the scene, somebody was referencing infobesity just in terms of computer, like, and looking at like, wow, we have information overload. And I go, oh no.
Yeah.
I was like, this is what my patients have. And that was 2011. That was before any like blogs and like all the, this other stuff. We're so infobese. And so one of the
Yeah.
things with a doctor versus myself is like, knowledge doesn't help us practice. Like, knowledge doesn't equate to practice, right?
Yeah.
So you can pass the test and know that somebody should have, like, even if it is accurate, 1 gram of protein per pound of body fat.
Yeah.
But if you don't know how to help somebody get that in, and to judge whether or not them getting that in is actually able to be broken down, used, absorbed, eliminated, and not, have downsides to it, you don't, like, that's the whole system. And then also, even if you knew how to practice that, if you don't have the time and that isn't your focus. So I think it's that space of
Yeah.
it too. We have this belief, and I guess I'm derailing on a tangent of this concept of, if doctors just knew nutrition, right? Like, there's this whole thing
Yeah.
of like, all the hospital, all doctors are going to now learn nutrition. I don't care. Like, if you're not practicing it all the time, like I could learn how something about fixing a car. If I'm not fixing cars all the time, please don't bring me my car, like your car to be fixed, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I think that's a little bit of a divergence there, but an important one to click on. Yeah.
I agree, but I think it also brings us nicely back to your pizza, right? So when
Mm-hmm.
we talk about your considerations, so we talked about the crust. What
Mm-hmm.
about the toppings? What else are you putting on that pizza? What are you considering? Be that
Yeah.
within your own specialty or perhaps that you refer out and you collaborate with other providers
Yeah,
on. Yeah.
absolutely. So you go through the process of building it. You do your crust, your sauce, your cheese, you personalize what's delicious to you, and you have evidence, so that it's working, right? And then you explore toppings. Now, sometimes toppings are the enabler for fixing something in the crust or the sauce or the cheese. So I want to be clear on that. So when I think of toppings, I think of supplements, medication interventions, lifestyle choices, cold plunging, saunas, like all these other things, but they're toppings because they are not there. They may participate in helping secure a better foundation, like make the pizza better, but they're not the thing that you can just do in and of themselves, right? So I was saying to somebody, like, I love anchovies, like, and I personally love an anchovy on a pizza. One anchovy goes a long way, you know what I mean? Like, or 4 anchovies goes a long way. So I don't need a lot of them. And also the quality of the anchovy is really going to matter because there are some that I love and some that I'm like, ooh, way too salty or way too fishy or, that kind of thing. So we come in and we figure, that part out. But there are other people that are like, don't ever mention the word anchovy. And they might do what I think is egregious. They might put fruit on their pizza. Like that whole pineapple, like I'm just like, what? So that's the world
There's
of like
fighting
now,
words.
it's like, let's go like berberine, let's look at akkermansia, let's talk
Mm.
about glutamine, let's, talk about a GLP-1 agonist, let's talk about a cold plunge. So the reality of any of these things is we may use them at times. They may prevent some nutrient deficiencies or insufficiencies. They may help us optimize where we just like stop with nutrition. As an example for me, I don't do well if I eat right before bed, but I need magnesium before bed. So I will always take a magnesium supplement. Sometimes I'll take a magnesium supplement sitting in a magnesium bath. Like I know what magnesium does for my body, right? Like I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
like in order for me to like sleep well and be nice to people tomorrow. So, when I figure those pieces out, that's a topping there though, right? Like, in terms of it, and it is helping my body to work better. And it might be foundational for my motility, but the choice of the supplement is going to be something that I'm adding to round all of that out. And I think that because every product that exists today has a publicist, what ends up happening is the communication by way of research studies, marketing, influencers on podcasts, practitioner, like all of these different things, people who are paid. You have all of these different places where that publicist message is coming through, where we're apt to think of things as a solution instead of a tool or a topping. And for me, I see that in okay, I'll give an example. I love like to get out there and I wish that there was a shoe that would help me run faster. I am not a fast runner. I am a decent runner, but I am just never I'm not designed that way. And I have just hit a wall with like how fast. Now, I could train to run faster like that. And that is on the table.
Sure.
And there have been times. But boy, have I bought several pairs of shoes at different times because the marketing had me certain that I was going to feel faster. And sometimes, by the way, I just feel faster because of the way I look. I'm like, oh man, like I just look like I'm faster, and then you like look at the time and you're like, oh, okay, it wasn't any faster, like that kind of thing. And
Oh,
so
great.
I think, yeah. So, and this, I started my career in advertising. I understand the power of marketing. The marketing is designed to do that for you.
Yeah.
So I think that it's really important that you vet your information sources, and anything that you're going to invest in, any topping, really has to be one from a source that knows you, your body, and your why. Like, why am I making a certain choice? So when somebody tells me that they are making a certain choice, like sometimes they'll say, I don't have anything in the morning. Instead of just going into, well, you need this and this, and I want you to have overnight oats and 20 grams of protein, and here's this. I'm going to ask 4 or 5 questions about why they're not having something in the morning. Like what's going on, from an environment standpoint. How do you feel when you wake up? How's your stomach feel? Like, are you worried about like if you have something like you're going to, be driving the kids to school and have to poop, like, or you're bloated or, whatever. And we unpack that, and that curiosity gets me into, all right, now I want you to experiment with this and tell me if this actually resolves this and doesn't create another issue, on that part. Those are the kinds of investments that we want to make with our with our toppings and with our choices. Yeah.
And what a powerful approach to medicine and healthcare by inviting the person to be curious about themselves again,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
To ask those questions as to, well, why is that? And I wonder if we can play with this and let's see how that feels.
Mhm.
Because I've within weight loss, especially if someone comes in and they're overweight and they've tried, 25 things and nothing has worked, there's almost a sense of war with the body
Yeah.
and a huge disconnect, right?
Yeah.
Because you want this, body is doing that, and you're not happy. And what a
Yes.
beautiful thing to invite that curiosity back in, especially in a space where there's purposeful barriers between one another. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's so like it is so needed in the weight health space. I recall like
Yeah.
in my private practice, and it was interesting during COVID because we do this a lot on Zoom and you feel like kind of weird yelling on Zoom at each other. But we would yell, we would cry, we would laugh, but we would yell a lot about all the times that we've been told to just do this. And I'm like, the number
Mm,
of times that I started off really because I'm a people pleaser too. I was like, and certainly because I didn't feel
yep.
comfortable in my body, I was like, well, let me just try all the things that could make me feel comfortable. And so I tried what everybody else like told me.
Yeah.
And so it was like, and literally, I think people who are grabbing for a semaglutide tirzepatide are screaming, I have tried every friggin' thing under the sun,
Yeah.
and I am not like, and it like at a certain point, I just have to believe that this is not because I haven't tried it, right? Like that, like
Yeah.
and it's like, in
Yeah.
society, like middle finger you, stop telling me that I'm the failure, right?
Yeah.
And then let's breathe. And
Yeah.
then we usually laugh, we cry, and we come back and we're like, so if I'm not the failure, then
Yeah.
is it fair to start to, and this is also why, from an assessment standpoint of understanding weight health, it's not just your labs, it's not just your digestion. It is also your breathing and your vagus nerve function. It is
Yeah.
it is not just the weight on the scale, but it's your weight composition. But it's
Yeah.
also questions about your lived experience, because I need to understand why, I had somebody who was, I mean, we have to keep unpacking that eating food is very difficult, because when they start eating, they just keep eating, and they've always overridden their, he's like, I feel full. It's not that I don't like, and I'm like, you have what I call suboptimal suppressed. But his trauma is that food was not available for him. So
Yeah.
when he was growing up, he was in multiple different families. They did not have
Yeah.
access to food. And now he has so much money and so much access that what ends up happening is when he starts eating, he just keeps eating. And he, is like, okay, like, and so we had to put these guardrails up, and, genetics, that was not the factor. This wasn't somebody who
Yeah.
had my genetics or similar
Yeah.
genetics or those pieces. What the freedom that he has now to say that when I am experiencing that, we just love on that little kid. Like, we're just like,
Yeah.
I am so sorry that you didn't have access to food. Like, think
Yeah.
about what that meant, and think
Yeah.
about like how at a time period you felt like, and he was telling me that with different like siblings, and he was in the foster care system. So there were people that like he considers siblings, because for time periods they
Yeah.
were in the same homes. And he's like, I also used to sometimes give them my food, because I felt
Yeah.
like they had, and that kind of thing. And I'm like, look at this lover in there, like this person who is like giving to others, whatever. And of course, that's also played out in his adult life, where he was giving to others, and, giving food, and sometimes giving food in a way that wasn't helpful, to other
Yeah.
people. And so we've unpacked that stuff. And he has an amazing therapist, because that's not my skill set, but
Yeah.
we talk about that part, and it's like, look at you getting to love and make peace with your past, but also recognize that the accumulation of weight, and his doctors just always said to him, like, you need to stop overeating, right? And it was like, do you understand what you're saying to someone? It's like,
Yeah.
it's so, yeah. Anyway,
Yeah. Yeah.
so many patients like this. And I think that
Yeah.
at the end of the day, our humanity lies in helping connect the dots for people with
Yeah.
their weight health challenges, and figuring out what is doable, and also what their body is asking for today. And that's going to be really different. So if you are someone like one of my clients, one of my patients who said to me when I met her, her doctor sent her to me because she was pretty close to her quote unquote goal weight, and said to her, it's going to be time for you to go off the medication. And she's like, oh, I'll come see you, but like you can pry the medication from my dying hand. She's like, I have never felt better in my life.
Yeah.
And I said, and she's like, and the doctor also referenced, and then I dove into, I was like, I think some of your labs aren't in the best space. And then also we ended up figuring out by conversation that her skin's pretty saggy. So we knew there was, and she's like, and I don't like exercising and this.
Yeah.
So we just went through it, and she's like, look, if you give me any recommendations about what to do from a food standpoint, I'm not going to do them. And I said, you know what? Clarity is such kindness. Thank you. Like, because don't waste my
Yeah.
time. Like, I don't want to like brainstorm breakfast,
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just said, hey, do you think that if there are 7 days in a week, do you think 4 days a week we could get in these supplements? And she was like, I think 4 days felt reasonable, right? And then we started to talk about exercise, and it turned out that she does not like encountering the people that are at the gyms local to her. And I said, oh,
Sure.
I have a friend, like she lives in Montana. She can Zoom with you. And she and her husband travel all the time. And I was like, she can Zoom with you wherever. Like, if you want to just I was like, and she's pretty cool and kind of could care less what you look like. She's just here to help you be strong. And they got on Zoom. And the next thing I hear, she's like doing strength training 4 or 5 times a week. And XYZ. So her doctor like was mad at me because she's like, I don't want to keep her. I said, fine, like, don't, then you're going to lose a patient. And this patient, I was like, maybe 2 or 3 years from now, this person's going to be at a place where they might feel comfortable changing the medication. But we've got 50 years of earned personal discomfort with dieting and everything else that like, it's going to take more than me coming in and being like, you're going to do great. Like, don't worry, you've got this. Like, you licked this. Like I was like, are you
Yeah.
kidding? It might take 10 years for us. Like, who cares,
Yeah.
on that part. So
Yeah.
I think we just have to be more curious and more humane in all of this. Yeah.
I'm curious for the audience that's listening that hears what you're saying in this very self-determined insofar as you get to pick your own path to wellness and compassionate path to wellness, and that resonates with them, and they sit there and they're like, how on earth do I find a practitioner like you? Because for better or worse, well, I think the tides are turning and we're starting to see a little bit more open-mindedness and heart-centeredness within care. It's not there. We've talked already that the system is broken, and that's why GLP-1s are so powerful within the system, right? The system is not set up to support the person. In terms of self-advocacy, in terms of finding a provider or a team of providers, what's your advice? Because I don't want to leave people feeling a little bit like, oh, shoot, if I can't find this, if I can't connect with Ashley, if I can't connect with Krista, it's all for none.
Yeah.
What can we offer people?
Yeah, I love it. So I wrote my book because I wanted people to have this in their own hands. And that is a cost. So I want to acknowledge that, unless you can get it at the library, which will take a bit of time, but it's about $30. And in there's a QR code, and the QR code connects you to our online resources where we're also offering health coaches. And one of the purpose of the health coach there is to be able to be a companion for you, to have a human contact that can help you with finding resources. So we have a network of clinicians and practitioners around the country, and we're always acquiring new ones. And we're also helping, I hope, to empower people to have what they need to vet clinicians on that part. Now, that's this like very Pollyanna, lovely world, because at the end of the day, usually what drives our choice is like, who does my insurance take, right? And or who's local to me, because of the crazy laws too. Like, I think they're kind of crazy. Like, I wish that like we just had national passes, so that you could see a patient in any state. But I do think that there are the concept of interviewing somebody and being okay if you don't jive with someone, if they're not curious about you as an individual. Now, look, I've had really bad days, so I'm sure there are patients out there that are like, she wasn't curious with me today. And usually I'm like, I'm so sorry. Like, I'm not, my best. But they may be out there and be like, I thought she was the worst. And I'm like, great. I just hope you found someone else, so like there is that piece. But I do think that also, I think gone is the belief that a physician can handle this alone. So I also would encourage you to look for someone who is a multidisciplinary approach, who is bringing in a dietitian and a coach. Now, that said, there are also dietitians and coaches that are totally practicing outside of their scope and doing all of this stuff where a physician really should be involved, because we need diagnosis, we need assessment. And then I think it's really interesting to look at people who have chosen, like a lot of times people have said to me, like, did you become a dietitian? Oh, it's so nice that you're a dietitian. I'm like, oh, I want to be clear. Like, I definitely could have been a doctor. Like, I just chose not to be a doctor. Right. So like, you're, as a naturopath, like, you're like, okay, I chose not to be an MD. But here's what attracted me to being a naturopath. Here's the way that I want to practice with you. If I'm a DO or if I'm a chiropractor, et cetera. I also think it's really smart for you to have a very honest budgeting conversation with someone from day one. Especially if you're considering any weight health journey. So if you're looking for help in that space, to understand, are you going to ask me to buy labs or supplements, or are you going to recommend that I go to a gym, or like, are we going to be able to do this if this is my budget? Right. So it's the same thing as like, if I was going online shopping, or I'm going into a store, and I like, there's just certain dresses like I can't buy. Like, I don't like, I'm like, if and sometimes I just convince myself, you know what, it was worth it to me to buy the $500 jacket and maybe like make food at home for, and what a privilege I have. I just want to acknowledge, on that part. But I think budgeting is not done, and often leads people to feel like, okay, well, I know I can pay for the initial, but they're not thinking about, am I really going to be willing to pay for this a year from now? And what's interesting is we don't tend to think about that when it comes to like Netflix or ESPN, but we should be thinking about it when it comes to our health, right? On that part, and having those conversations. And, in this space of, when we unpack like that, we have to budget for all of this, and thinking about it, we want to make sure that we're able to think about like how we budget for the variety of different practitioners, and really look at budgeting for the long-term success. But I think also beyond budgeting, it is totally appropriate to make a choice about how someone aligns with you based on how you feel, because weight health is so personal, right? And so I think that sometimes there's a concept of like how I choose a clinician, or maybe even feeling like I don't get to choose. And I do think that that's an important thing. And I think any good I'm going to say this, any good practitioner is going to be very receptive. Now, sometimes we have to acknowledge our egos, and we are humans. So how you deliver this is if somebody says, hey, I don't know that we're the best fit, but what I'm looking for is this. Is there anyone in your network, or could you see how, this? And that has worked really well for me. I love when my patients have said to me, I really like your coach. I'm not sure you and I are such a fit. I was like, okay, great. Like, let's get another clinician in here. And then the other piece of it is that you may outgrow someone. So there's a variety, within that space. We are navigating a space where we're just in a very judgy society. And so there's a lot of right or wrong. And so it might feel like a practitioner says something that's not right for you, and you might jump like out of your skin. That has happened to so many of my patients who have come to me ready to ditch their doctor because their doctor suggested semaglutide for them, for their adolescent child, for, whatever. And we ultimately end up arriving back at semaglutide. It was just the way the conversation happened. They felt like, oh my gosh, you're just somebody who's throwing a pill at me, when what I'm looking for is like a whole solution, on that part. So that's also a space where that allows you to say like, oh, like what you just said, like kind of like hit me real hard and I don't feel comfortable right now. Can you actually help me understand a little bit more what you mean? And if they're not willing to do that, then that's your like, and if not, like, thank you. I appreciate what you've provided me. I'm going to move on to the next. So it does require, you to be you are the director of your healthcare, like, in that part, which is a very different role than historically was set up. It was usually like you went to your doctor to be like, just do whatever tell me what I'm supposed to do and I'll go do it, kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think this is my hoped transformation within medicine, that there's more collaboration between provider and patient, but as well between providers, but carefully, not to the end where you're shopping for medical opinion, right? You're shopping for your opinion, which I think can be just as dangerous. And so audience, I'll put it out there, if you've decided that you want A, and you only want A, and yet you see several doctors and they're all saying, you should probably have B, you need to be mindful as to the why that they're saying that. I think delivery is really important. I think delivery is very important to that conversation. But sometimes there also has to be an awareness that if you're going to an expert, you need to hear what the expert is saying. Not just looking for
And then I'd also
confirmation.
encourage the flip side, because, I train a lot of practitioners, you interact with a lot of practitioners. Practitioners, get over yourself a little bit. Like this is not like, especially those of you that are in a fee for service, do not look at somebody as in the moment money. Like, I've had people where they're like, oh, I just need another patient. And so that patient comes in and they say to them, I saw somebody before and they said this, and I don't want to do that. And you're like, oh, we don't have to do that. Let's do this. And then you realize, oh, I understand why that person was thinking that. So I think that's the other part of it, which is, if revenue is your driver, I've never felt like you should be a practitioner. Like it's like, if go sell something, what I mean? It's like on that part. So I think that's a big space for all of us. Yeah.
And I think beautifully too, there's always going to be that happy balance, right? When you're good at what you do, it will invite that income.
Absolutely. Yes.
So Ashley, this has been so wonderfully delightful, and I'm so grateful for the time that we have together. And I'm grateful that you've packaged up a lot of this into a book that people can get and can start to get a little bit of access to this. I think especially as the new year approaches, and for better and worse, weight is on people's minds. So thank you for the compassionate and science-informed conversation. I value the nuance that you brought to the GLP-1 conversation, because I think far too often it's a little bit of a polar, it's horrible or it's the best thing ever, and there's not much in between.
Nuance, right?
What is missing from national discourse?
That's right. That's right. I'm so purple. It's my favorite color. And I'm like, just purple, any of these blends, it's like,
my
thank
gosh.
you so much.
If only. Well, thank you again so very much. And audience, again, we'll make sure that we have within the podcast notes links to her site, her book, as well as the DNA 360, one of those access points where you can go in and look at your own genes and understand a little bit of that personalization to you as well, where you could be focusing more energy and effort versus not. So until next time, we wish you all adieu. Thank you so very much. Au revoir, mes amis. Au revoir.